The muddy waters of the Missouri River lapped against the weathered planks of the trading post's dock as Sarah Miller stood watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. 3 years a widow now, she had taken over running Miller's River Trading after her husband William's death, maintaining the vital lifeline for steamboats and settlers making their way toward Silver City. The spring of 1875 had brought unusually high waters, along with whispers of railroad surveyors pushing west through Sioux territory. Sarah pulled her worn shawl tighter against the evening chill, her thoughts drifting to the strange dreams that had plagued her sleep lately. Visions of iron horses breathing fire across the prairies, of ancient spirits rising from sacred grounds, of blood-staining pristine waters. She dismissed them as merely the product of an overactive mind, worn thin from the endless work of managing the post alone. The trading post sat at a crucial bend in the river, where the swift waters slowed just enough to make landing possible. Sarah had expanded William's original operation, adding a proper warehouse and guest quarters for travelers. Local tribes, particularly the Sioux, traded regularly here, appreciating her fair dealings and respect for their customs. Unlike other posts that often cheated the natives, Sarah maintained her husband's policy of honest trade. Thunder rolled in the distance as she made her final checks of the day's inventory. The spring storm season had arrived early this year, bringing with it an unusual tension. Sarah had noticed fewer Sioux traders lately, and those who did come spoke in hushed tones of troubles brewing upriver. The railroad surveyors, led by the ambitious Thomas Wilson, had been pushing deeper into tribal lands, marking routes for the iron rails that would soon slice through the territory. That night, as rain drummed against the trading post's roof, urgent pounding at the door jolted Sarah from her ledger work. She opened it to find James Thompson, one of her regular riverboat captains, supporting an elderly Sioux man who appeared gravely injured. The man's ceremonial garments marked him as a holy man, though they were now soaked with blood and river water. "Found him clinging to a log 2 bends upriver," Thompson explained breathlessly. "Looks like he took a bullet. Raiders, maybe, or claim jumpers." He was muttering about railroad men before he passed out. Sarah quickly cleared her desk, creating a makeshift examination table as Thompson laid the wounded shaman down. Years of frontier life had taught her basic medicine, though this would test her skills. Through the night, Sarah worked to save the holy man's life, cleaning and binding his wounds while he drifted between consciousness and fevered dreams. His words, when they came, were a mix of Sioux and broken English, speaking of visions and warnings. As dawn approached, he gripped her arm with surprising strength, his dark eyes fixing on hers with unsettling intensity. "The spirits have led me here," he whispered in clear English. "You have a pure heart, woman who trades fairly. The ancestors say you must see what is coming." Before Sarah could respond, he pressed something into her palm, a small leather pouch containing what felt like stones or bones. His next words came in Sioux, a chant that seemed to echo in her head, even after his voice fell silent. The morning brought more questions than answers. The shaman had vanished during the brief moment Sarah stepped out to fetch fresh water, leaving behind only the mysterious pouch and a single black feather. James Thompson, who had intended to rest before continuing downriver, had no memory of bringing the injured man to her door, insisting he'd spent the night anchored safely at the dock. Sarah's world shifted dramatically in the days that followed. The dreams intensified, but they were different now, sharper, more vivid, filled with details that would later prove true. She saw railroad men marking lands with red flags, followed by clashes that hadn't yet happened. She witnessed flooding that would destroy homesteads, fires that would consume warehouses, and the faces of strangers who would soon arrive seeking help or bringing danger. Sarah found herself drawn to the river's edge more frequently now, watching the steamboats drift past while trying to make sense of her newfound ability. The visions came without warning, striking like lightning across clear skies, leaving her dizzy with knowledge she wasn't sure she wanted. The busy dock at Fort Worth had become both her sanctuary and her burden, as each face that passed could trigger another glimpse of what was to come. One particularly humid morning, she witnessed a well-dressed man named William stepping off a riverboat, his crisp suit and calculating eyes marking him as a railroad representative before he even spoke. In her vision, she had seen him standing before a crowd, unrolling maps that carved angry red lines through people's homes. Now, watching him stride purposefully toward the town hall, she felt her heart sink with the weight of certainty. The local trading post, run by the aging Thomas, had become a gathering place for worried homesteaders. Sarah listened as they shared rumors of the railroad's expansion plans, their voices growing heated with each passing day. She kept her knowledge to herself, understanding that speaking of her visions would only brand her as unstable, or worse, a witch. But the burden of foreknowledge weighed heavily, especially when she recognized faces from her dreams among the worried crowds. Elizabeth, the schoolteacher who rented a room above the trading post, noticed Sarah's distraction. The two women had formed a quiet friendship over shared cups of tea, and Elizabeth's keen eyes missed little. "You've changed since that strange night," she observed one evening, her voice gentle but probing. "It's as if you're carrying shadows behind your eyes." Sarah could only offer a wan smile in response, unable to share the truth of those shadows. The railroad survey crews arrived exactly as Sarah had foreseen, led by William and his assistant Jake. They moved through the community like an advancing storm, marking trees and driving stakes into disputed land. Sarah watched from her porch as they worked their way along the riverbank, knowing that the peaceful coexistence between the traders and the remaining Sioux camps would soon be shattered. In her latest vision, she had seen Samuel, a local farmer, standing with a rifle against a backdrop of flames. The image haunted her, especially when Samuel began organizing meetings with other landowners in the back room of Thomas's trading post. She recognized the determination in their faces, the same expression she had witnessed in her dreams of conflict and resistance. The situation grew more complex when Mary, a young Sioux woman who occasionally traded beadwork at the post, sought Sarah out in secret. Through broken English and desperate gestures, Mary conveyed that her people had their own warnings about the coming changes. The similarity between their foretellings sent chills down Sarah's spine, confirming that her visions were more than mere dreams. Catherine, the local midwife and closest thing Fort Worth had to a doctor, began stopping by more frequently, concerned about Sarah's increasingly distant behavior. "You're seeing things the rest of us can't," Catherine said one afternoon, sorting her herbs on Sarah's kitchen table. It wasn't a question, and Sarah found herself wondering if the healer possessed some similar gift of insight. The pressure of keeping her visions secret while watching events unfold exactly as she had foreseen them began to take its toll. Sarah started documenting everything in a journal, writing by candlelight when sleep proved elusive. The pages filled with sketches of faces she hadn't yet met and events that hadn't yet occurred, creating a testament to a future she hoped might still be changed. When news arrived that railroad representatives would be holding a town meeting in Abilene to discuss their expansion plans, Sarah knew she had to attend. Her latest vision had shown her a confrontation that could turn violent, and while she couldn't prevent the railroad's advance, perhaps she could prevent bloodshed. The weight of this responsibility settled onto her shoulders as she packed her traveling bag, wondering if the mysterious shaman had known what burden he was placing upon her that fateful night. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Abilene's dusty main street as Sarah made her way toward the town hall. Her worn leather satchel, containing both her prophetic journal and a small Derringer pistol, bounced gently against her hip with each step. The familiar scent of wood smoke and river water drifted from the nearby Kansas River, where steamboats still churned the muddy waters despite the railroad's growing dominance. Inside the crowded meeting hall, Sarah recognized faces from her visions. Thomas Burke, the railroad's ambitious young surveyor with calculating eyes, and William Henderson, the weather-beaten cattle baron whose land stood in the path of the proposed track. The tension in the room was as thick as summer storm clouds, and she could almost taste the metallic hint of violence that her vision had promised. James Morton, the town's silver-haired mayor, called the meeting to order with 3 sharp raps of his gavel. Sarah watched as railroad representatives unfurled detailed maps across wooden tables, their crisp edges marking future iron paths like prophecies written in ink. Her fingers traced the outline of her journal through her skirt pocket, wondering if she should have brought the sketches that showed what might unfold here. The discussion began cordially enough, with Thomas presenting the railroad's planned route and compensation offers. But Sarah noticed William's jaw tightening with each word, his calloused hands gripping his chair until knuckles turned white. In her vision, she had seen those same hands reaching for a gun when the railroadmen mentioned eminent domain. The memory made her shudder. Catherine Miller, a fellow widow whose farm lay along the proposed route, caught Sarah's eye from across the room. Sarah Miller gazed across the Missouri River's churning waters, her widow's black dress billowing in the autumn wind. The bustling river port of Fort Worth had changed dramatically since the railroad surveyors arrived 6 months ago. Their presence had stirred up more than just dust and commerce. It had awakened something ancient and dangerous in the land itself. Ever since she had saved the dying Sioux medicine man from the fever last spring, her dreams had been filled with haunting visions that left her gasping in the dark. The railway company's head engineer, William Thompson, had taken up residence in the town's finest boarding house, making grand promises about progress and prosperity. But Sarah's latest vision showed her something different. Rails stained with blood, sacred burial grounds desecrated, and a darkness spreading across the land like ink in water. She kept these premonitions to herself, knowing the townsfolk already whispered about her strange friendship with the native healer. James Davis, the rail crew's foreman, swaggered through town with his men, drinking heavily at the saloon and harassing the local traders. Sarah watched them from her herb shop's window, noting how they eyed the Sioux trading parties with barely concealed hostility. The medicine man had warned her that the railroad's chosen route would cut through ancient holy sites, but Thompson dismissed such concerns as superstitious nonsense. That evening, as Sarah prepared medicines in her shop, Catherine Wilson burst through the door, her face flushed with worry. "They're fighting down by the river landing. The rail crews and the Sioux traders. It's turning ugly." Sarah grabbed her medical bag, knowing in her bones that this was just the beginning of the violence she'd foreseen. The air crackled with tension as they hurried toward the commotion. At the riverbank, Thomas Johnson, the town's sheriff, struggled to maintain order as rail workers and Sioux traders faced off over a disputed shipment of supplies. Sarah pushed through the crowd, her heart pounding as she recognized faces from her visions. The medicine man stood apart from the others, his eyes meeting hers with silent understanding. They both knew what was coming. The future was unfolding exactly as she had seen it. Jake Miller, a young surveyor who had always treated the Sioux with respect, tried to mediate between the groups. But Sarah could see the hatred burning in James Davis's eyes as he gripped the handle of his pistol. The medicine man had told her that Jake's spirit walked two paths, one leading to peace, the other to destruction. Now she watched as he stood between worlds, unknowingly holding the fate of two peoples in his trembling hands. Samuel Wilson, Catherine's husband and the town's banker, arrived with a group of merchants who had significant investments in the railroad's success. They demanded the sheriff arrest the Sioux traders for interfering with railway business. Sarah felt the familiar sensation of an impending vision, like lightning about to strike. The world tilted sideways as images flooded her mind. Fire consuming the town, horses stampeding in terror, and a mysterious figure emerging from the flames. The tension finally erupted when Davis shoved one of the elderly Sioux traders, sending the old man sprawling into the mud. Sarah's vision suddenly snapped into crystal clarity. She saw Davis drawing his gun, saw the bullet's path before it left the chamber. Without thinking, she lunged forward, knocking Jake aside just as the shot rang out. The bullet whizzed past where his head had been moments before. Chaos erupted along the riverbank as both sides reached for weapons. Sheriff Johnson fired his revolver into the air, bellowing for order, but the damage was done. The medicine man helped Sarah to her feet, his expression grave. "You have seen what is to come," he said quietly. "The Iron Horse brings more than progress. It brings a test of souls." Sarah nodded, knowing that her gift of foresight carried with it a heavy responsibility. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Sarah noticed William Thompson watching her with calculating eyes. Her latest vision had shown him plotting with Samuel Wilson, making secret deals that would profit from the coming violence. She would have to be careful. Knowledge of the future made her dangerous to men whose plans depended on others remaining blind to their true intentions. The sun set over the Missouri, painting the water blood red as Sarah contemplated the choices that lay ahead. Thompson approached her the next day, his manner deceptively friendly as he invited her to discuss the unfortunate incident over dinner. Sarah's gift showed her the poison he intended to slip into her wine, the convenient explanation of a grieving widow's suicide he had already prepared. She declined politely, watching his face darken with barely concealed rage. The game had begun in earnest now, a dance of secrets and shadows along the river's edge. The medicine man visited her shop after nightfall, bringing news that more Sioux warriors were gathering upriver. "Your visions show you fragments," he explained, "but all paths lead to a moment of choice. The railroad cannot be stopped, but blood need not flow if wisdom prevails. Sarah understood. Her gift wasn't meant to prevent the future, but to help guide others toward better choices when the crucial moment arrived. The bustling river port of Fort Worth drew Sarah like a lodestone as summer heat shimmered across the Missouri. Here, amid the chaos of cargo vessels and construction crews, she could better track the railroad's inexorable advance. The trading post she'd established gave her a perfect vantage point to observe both the town's legitimate commerce and its shadowy undercurrents, where Thompson's agents moved like wolves among sheep. William, a young surveyor with kind eyes and calloused hands, began frequenting her shop with questions about local terrain. Though he worked for the railroad, Sarah's visions showed him wrestling with his conscience over the company's ruthless methods. She found herself sharing carefully chosen details about the land and its people, hoping to nurture that seed of doubt. The medicine man's warnings proved prescient as more Sioux families arrived downriver, displaced by the railroad's advance. Sarah's dreams grew more intense. She saw fire consuming the wooden trestles of a half-built bridge, warriors on horseback silhouetted against the flames. But she also glimpsed something worse. Thompson's men deliberately provoking violence to justify a military response. James, the local sheriff, started paying closer attention to Sarah's activities. She caught him watching her shop from across the street, his face unreadable. Her gift showed her his divided loyalties, a man sworn to uphold the law while accepting railroad money to look the other way. Yet there was something else there too, a deep weariness with corruption that might be turned to advantage. The tension in Fort Worth grew thick as summer storms gathered on the horizon. Thompson's men grew bolder, harassing Sioux families who came to trade. Sarah began storing extra supplies in her cellar, guided by visions of coming need. The medicine man visited more frequently now, teaching her to better understand the fragmentary glimpses of possible futures that haunted her sleep. One sweltering afternoon, a group of railroad workers led by Thomas, Thompson's brutish foreman, cornered a young Sioux boy behind Sarah's shop. Without hesitation, she stepped between them, her hand steady on the rifle she'd learned to keep close. "This is my property," she declared, meeting Thomas's glare. "Take your trouble elsewhere." Her gift showed her how close violence hovered, but also revealed the cowardice beneath the foreman's bluster. The incident drew notice. William sought her out that evening, speaking in hushed tones about documents he'd discovered, evidence of Thompson's illegal land grabs and payoffs. Sarah's visions flickered as he spoke, his body floating face down in the river, or riding west with the damning papers, or standing beside her when the crucial moment came. She knew then that her gift was showing her not just what might be, but testing her wisdom in choosing which futures to nurture. The medicine man appeared as they talked, silent as a shadow. He nodded to William, then turned to Sarah. "The spirits did not give you these visions to stand alone," he said simply. "Even the mighty river needs many tributaries to reach the sea." She understood. The power to see possible futures meant nothing without allies to help shape them. That night, Sarah dreamed of trains wreathed in smoke, of blood on steel rails, of money changing hands in darkened rooms. But she also saw something new. Faces emerging from the shadows, people choosing to stand against the tide of greed. William's earnest determination, James's weary integrity, the quiet strength of the Sioux families, threads that might be woven into something stronger than Thompson's web of corruption. Dawn found her writing letters, sending coded messages upriver and down. Her gift showed her fragments of responses yet to come. Elizabeth in Abilene, rallying support among honest merchants. Catherine in Silver City gathering evidence of similar railroad schemes. The pieces were moving into place, but Sarah knew the true test still lay ahead. Thompson would not surrender his ambitions easily, and the railroad's advance brooked no delay. The vision hit Sarah Miller like a thunderbolt as she stood on the bustling riverfront dock in Fort Worth. Her eyes glazed over, and suddenly she saw it clear as day. The massive locomotive derailing at Dead Man's Curve, plunging into the ravine below in a catastrophic explosion of steam and steel. The shaman's gift had never shown her anything this devastating before. Dozens would die if she couldn't prevent it, including William Thompson, the railroad baron who'd been threatening to seize her land. Sarah steadied herself against a wooden post, her widow's black dress billowing in the hot Texas wind. Since saving the dying Sioux holy man 3 months ago and receiving his blessing, these premonitions had become more frequent and intense. But this one felt different, more urgent, more certain. The vision showed the disaster happening at sunset tomorrow, when the inaugural run of the Fort Worth and Western Line would make its first journey west. Thomas Davis, the town marshal, noticed her unsteady stance and hurried over. "Mrs. Miller, are you unwell?" he asked, concern etched on his weathered face. Sarah forced a weak smile, knowing she couldn't explain the true cause of her distress. The lawman already thought her addled after her husband James's death last year. Speaking of mystical visions from a native healer would only confirm those suspicions. "I need to warn them," Sarah whispered, more to herself than the marshal. But who would believe her? William Thompson had already dismissed her protests about the railroad's planned route through sacred Sioux burial grounds. The wealthy magnate cared only for profit and progress, not ancient traditions or a widow's supernatural warnings. Yet Sarah knew with bone-deep certainty that if the train departed as scheduled, disaster would strike. Jake Wilson, Thompson's head of security, watched Sarah with suspicious eyes from across the busy wharf. He'd been following her movements ever since she started speaking out against the railroad's expansion. Sarah could feel his gaze boring into her back as she gathered her skirts and hurried toward the telegraph office. Perhaps if she couldn't convince Thompson directly, she could reach out to his partners in Abilene. The dusty streets were clogged with wagons and workers rushing to complete preparations for tomorrow's inaugural run. Sarah dodged between them, her mind racing. The vision had shown her specific details. A damaged section of track, sabotaged by unknown hands. But even if she could prove the danger, would anyone listen to a woman they considered unstable? The ghost of her beloved James seemed to whisper encouragement, urging her onward. Inside the telegraph office, Samuel Johnson looked up from his clicking machine with irritation. "Mrs. Miller, I've already told you, Mr. Thompson isn't accepting any more messages about delaying the railway opening. His orders were quite specific." Sarah gripped the counter, desperation rising in her throat. "Please, Samuel, lives depend on this. Just send one more wire. I'll pay double your usual rate." The telegraph operator's expression softened slightly. He'd known Sarah since before James's death, when she was still the respected wife of Fort Worth's most prominent riverboat captain. "Very well," he sighed, "but don't expect any response. Thompson's already en route from Silver City for tomorrow's ceremony." Sarah dictated her warning message with trembling voice, praying it would somehow make a difference. As sunset approached, Sarah found herself drawn to the railway construction site at the edge of town. Workers were performing final inspections of the gleaming new track, while Thompson's men stood guard against any last-minute sabotage attempts. The air hummed with anticipation for tomorrow's historic event. But beneath that excitement, Sarah sensed a darker current, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Suddenly, another vision flashed through her mind, this one showing her the face of the saboteur. To her shock, she recognized Jake Wilson, Thompson's own security chief. The pieces fell into place. Wilson had been secretly working with rival railway companies, planning to destroy Thompson's line before it could threaten their monopoly. Sarah's hands shook as she realized the full scope of the conspiracy. With renewed determination, Sarah hurried to Marshal Davis's office. "Thomas, I need your help," she said without preamble. "I can prove Jake Wilson is planning to sabotage the railway." The lawman's skeptical expression faded as Sarah described precise details about Wilson's movements and connections, things she couldn't possibly have known without supernatural aid. Finally, reluctantly, he agreed to investigate. As night fell over Fort Worth, Sarah accompanied Davis and his deputies as they quietly surrounded Wilson's boarding house. The security chief was caught red-handed with detailed plans of the railroad line and explosive devices. During questioning, he broke down and confessed everything. Sarah's warning had prevented a massacre, though she knew she could never reveal the true source of her knowledge. The next morning, William Thompson himself visited Sarah's riverside home. "Mrs. Miller," he said gruffly, "I owe you an apology, and my gratitude. Thanks to your intervention, many lives were saved." He hesitated, then continued, "I've decided to reroute the railway around the Sioux burial grounds. Perhaps there's wisdom in respecting the old ways after all." Sarah smiled, feeling the shaman's blessing flow through her like a warm current. That evening, as the sun set over the river, Sarah watched the inaugural train depart safely along its revised route. The shaman's gift had served its purpose, bringing harmony between the old world and the new. In her mind's eye, she saw James smiling down at her with pride. Tomorrow would bring new visions, new challenges. But for now, she was content, knowing she had honored both her husband's memory and the sacred trust placed in her by the Sioux holy man. As winter approached, Sarah's visions grew more intense and frequent. One particularly cold morning, she saw a terrifying scene unfold. Ice breaking apart on the river, a train derailing from the newly constructed bridge, and dozens of souls lost to the frigid waters. The vision left her trembling, but she knew she had to act quickly. The railway company had begun running night routes across the river despite the dangerous conditions. Racing through the bitter wind to William Thompson's office in town, Sarah found him deep in discussion with railroad engineers about expanding service before spring. When she burst in warning of unstable ice conditions, Thompson's initial skepticism quickly faded as he remembered her previous life-saving intuition. "Mrs. Miller, you've earned my trust," he declared, immediately ordering all-night crossings suspended until proper safety inspections could be completed. The next day, surveyors discovered massive cracks forming in the river ice, exactly where Sarah had described. The weight of a fully loaded train would have certainly caused a catastrophic collapse. Word of her second remarkable prediction spread quickly through the settlement, earning her both admiration and suspicion. Some whispered she was blessed with second sight, while others darkly suggested she practiced forbidden native medicine. At the trading post, Sarah overheard Elizabeth Carter, the banker's wife, warning others to keep their distance from the witch woman by the river. The words stung, but Sarah drew strength remembering the shaman's teachings about bearing the burden of power with dignity. That evening, she lit a sacred bundle of herbs he had given her, letting the familiar smoke carry her prayers skyward as she sought guidance. A letter arrived from Fort Worth, where William Thompson's superiors demanded construction resume despite the dangers. Thompson himself rode out to Sarah's cabin, conflict evident in his weathered face. "They're threatening to replace me if I don't get those trains moving," he admitted. "But I can't ignore your warnings. Too many lives at stake." Sarah saw the cost of his loyalty in the new gray streaks at his temples. That night, her vision revealed an alternative, an ancient Sioux crossing point 5 miles downstream where the river ran narrower and the bedrock would better support a bridge. When she shared this knowledge with Thompson, his eyes lit up with hope. The new route would add minimal distance while providing a far safer passage. Yet, Sarah knew she would have to tread carefully to avoid revealing the true source of her insights. As spring approached, tension mounted between the railroad men eager to resume construction and local settlers who had come to trust Sarah's judgment. The situation came to a head when Thomas Blake, a powerful railroad investor from Abilene, arrived demanding immediate action. He confronted Sarah publicly, attempting to discredit her as a superstitious widow standing in the way of progress. But Sarah stood her ground, drawing on an inner strength that surprised even her. "Mr. Blake," she declared before the gathered crowd, "I have lost a husband to this river's fury. Every warning I've given has proven true. The spirits of this land demand respect. Deny them at your peril." Her words carried such conviction that even Blake fell silent, perhaps sensing something beyond ordinary knowing in her steady gaze. That evening, as Sarah walked along the riverbank, she encountered the old shaman once more. He smiled knowingly, but spoke no words, simply pointing to where the first spring birds were returning to nest along the cliffs. She understood his message. Nature's wisdom would always guide those willing to listen. The new bridge would be built at the ancient crossing, and her gift would continue serving as a bridge between worlds. The railroad company eventually constructed their crossing at the location Sarah had indicated, incorporating traditional Sioux engineering principles that had helped their people safely cross the river for generations. William Thompson made sure local tribesmen were hired to assist with the construction, their ancestral knowledge finally valued alongside modern methods. As spring floods tested the new bridge, it stood firm, a testament to the power of combining old wisdom with new ways. Sarah Miller stood at the edge of the Missouri River, her piercing blue eyes scanning the distant horizon where railroad tracks now cut through the sacred Sioux burial grounds. The visions that had guided her these past months showed her what must be done. The Iron Horse could not be allowed to desecrate this holy place. Since saving the life of the wounded Sioux shaman 6 months ago, Her supernatural gift of foresight had grown stronger with each passing day, showing her glimpses of both triumph and tragedy along the expanding frontier. Thomas Wilson, the railroad baron from Fort Worth, had arrived in their riverside trading settlement with grand promises of progress and prosperity. But Sarah's visions revealed his true nature, a man whose greed would bring destruction to both the land and its people. She had seen the fires that would consume the native camps, the poisoned waters that would kill the fish, the sacred caves that would be dynamited into oblivion. The spirits had chosen her to prevent this future from coming to pass. William Johnson, the local banker who had courted Sarah since her husband's death 2 years prior, tried to convince her that the railroad's arrival was inevitable. "Progress can't be stopped, Sarah," he'd argued. "Better to profit from it than stand in its way." But he didn't understand the depth of her conviction, or the power of the visions that drove her. The shaman had told her she now carried a sacred duty to protect the balance between the worlds of spirit and flesh. The railroad survey crew, led by the ruthless James Thompson, had already begun marking their route through the burial grounds. Sarah had watched from hiding as they drove stakes into the sacred earth, each blow of their hammers sending shockwaves through her consciousness that manifested as blinding flashes of precognitive insight. The spirits of the dead were restless, angry at this violation of their eternal rest. They spoke to her in dreams, showing her how to thwart the Iron Horse's advance. Catherine Davis, the wife of the local trading post owner, had become Sarah's closest confidant. Though skeptical at first of Sarah's newfound abilities, Catherine had witnessed too many of her friend's predictions come true to maintain her doubts. Together they began gathering allies among both settlers and natives who understood the importance of preserving the sacred sites. The spirits had shown Sarah that unity between peoples would be crucial to their success. The tension in the settlement reached a breaking point when Samuel Miller, Sarah's brother-in-law, discovered Thomas Wilson's men secretly dumping industrial waste into the river upstream. Sarah's visions had warned of this, but seeing the reality, dead fish floating belly up in the poisoned waters, galvanized the community into action. Even William Johnson, despite his initial skepticism, could no longer ignore the railroad's destructive impact on their way of life. Through her supernatural sight, Sarah orchestrated a series of strategic interventions that delayed construction while building support for their cause. She knew exactly when and where to position protesters, which supply shipments to intercept, which officials to pressure. The spirits guided her hands as she wrote passionate letters to territorial authorities, revealing Wilson's illegal activities and environmental destruction. Her reputation for uncanny accuracy in predicting events lent weight to her warnings. The final confrontation came during a late autumn storm, when Sarah's visions led her to discover Wilson's men preparing to dynamite the largest burial cave. Lightning split the sky as she stood before them, her voice carrying with supernatural authority as she revealed every dark secret, every corrupt deal, every criminal act Wilson had committed. The workers, many of them local men who'd known Sarah for years, laid down their tools and walked away. Thomas Wilson's empire began to crumble as investigations sparked by Sarah's evidence uncovered a web of corruption stretching from Fort Worth to Abilene. The railroad was forced to reroute miles to the south, away from the sacred lands. The shaman returned to thank her, explaining that the spirits had chosen well in granting her their sight. She had restored balance not just to the land, but between two worlds that needed to find a way to coexist. William Johnson finally understood why Sarah had been chosen for this role. Her strength wasn't just in the supernatural gift she'd received, but in her wisdom in using it to bridge divisions between peoples and protect what was truly valuable. As spring returned to the river valley, Sarah's visions showed her a new future, one where progress didn't have to come at the cost of destruction, where the old ways and the new could find harmony. She had changed not just the course of the railroad, but the course of history itself. The settlement flourished as a model of cooperation between natives and settlers, with Sarah serving as a respected mediator blessed with the ability to see truth in all hearts. The trading post became a gathering place where stories were shared, traditions honored, and wisdom passed between cultures. Catherine Davis's husband expanded their business to include native crafts and medicines, creating economic opportunities that benefited both communities. Years later, as Sarah watched her grandchildren play along the pristine riverbank, she reflected on how different things might have been without the gift bestowed by that fateful act of kindness to a wounded shaman. The spirits still spoke to her, though less frequently now, showing her glimpses of a future where the lessons learned at their settlement would spread across the frontier. She had become a living bridge between worlds, proving that progress and preservation could walk hand in hand along the trail to tomorrow. As autumn painted the riverbank in amber and gold, Sarah found herself increasingly drawn to documenting her extraordinary journey. With Catherine's help, she began recording the stories and wisdom gained through her visions, creating a detailed chronicle that would serve as a guide for future generations. The leather-bound journal became filled with carefully penned accounts of both triumphs and cautionary tales, its pages a testament to the delicate balance between progress and preservation. The railroad eventually reached their settlement, but unlike other locations where development had brought discord, Sarah's foresight had allowed them to negotiate terms that protected both the sacred lands and the community's interests. Thomas, the young railroad surveyor who had initially viewed their settlement with skepticism, became one of their strongest allies in ensuring the tracks were laid with respect for the natural landscape and tribal boundaries. Word of their unique community spread to Silver City and Fort Worth, drawing visitors curious to witness the harmonious coexistence between settlers and natives. Among them was William, a journalist from Abilene, whose articles about Sarah's bridge-building work caught the attention of territorial governors and Indian agents alike. The settlement became a model for peaceful negotiation and mutual understanding, though Sarah knew from her visions that challenges would always test their resolve. As years passed, Sarah's granddaughter Emma showed signs of inheriting her grandmother's gift. The young girl would wake from dreams speaking of events yet to unfold, her innocent descriptions matching the complex visions that had guided Sarah for so long. The shaman's blessing, it seemed, had become a legacy that would continue protecting their community's delicate balance. The trading post, now managed by Catherine's son James, expanded to include a school where native children and settler children studied together, learning each other's languages and customs. Mary, a young Sioux teacher, worked alongside Elizabeth from Tombstone to create a curriculum that honored both traditions, their collaboration a living example of the unity Sarah had always envisioned. During one particularly harsh winter, Sarah's visions revealed an impending disaster that would have devastated communities along the river. Her warning allowed them to prepare, storing extra provisions and reinforcing structures before the worst blizzard in living memory descended upon the territory. The settlement became a haven for travelers caught in the storm, further cementing its reputation as a place where the spirits watched over all who sought shelter. Jake, the aging cavalry officer who had once dismissed Sarah's abilities as superstition, became one of her most devoted friends in his retirement years. He would often sit with her on the trading post's wide porch, sharing stories of how her insights had changed his understanding of the frontier and its people. Their conversations became legendary, drawing young and old alike to hear tales of how one act of compassion had transformed an entire region. Samuel, the last of the original settlers who had witnessed Sarah's first vision, worked tirelessly to ensure their community's story would never be forgotten. He commissioned a series of paintings depicting key moments in their settlement's history, including the fateful day when Sarah had found the wounded shaman. These artworks, created by both native and settler artists, adorned the walls of their newly built meeting hall, a visual reminder of their shared journey. As Sarah approached her twilight years, her visions showed her glimpses of a future beyond her own time. Railroads spanning the continent, cities rising from the prairie, and most importantly, pockets of understanding and cooperation sprouting from the seeds their settlement had planted. Though change was inevitable, the wisdom preserved in her journals and in the hearts of those she had touched would continue guiding future generations toward harmony. The river that had first drawn them to this place continued its eternal flow, its waters witnessing the unfolding of Sarah's final vision, one of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of compassion to bridge the deepest divides. As she watched her great-grandchildren play among the wildflowers, their laughter mixing with the ancient songs of the land, she knew that the gift bestowed upon her had served its true purpose, not just to see the future, but to help shape it for the better.